welcome Michael van Gelderen from UN Human Rights Office, which is very important for all of us to hear him. He's working on human rights, gender identity, of course, sex characteristics and sexual orientation. But it's very important to have him here today. So, Michael, welcome, and please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Irene, and thank you to all of you at OII Europe for inviting me to speak today. It's really great to be with all of you. I just want to start by expressing my profound admiration for the intersex movement globally and in Europe. What you have achieved in the past decades is truly extraordinary. I actually don't think extraordinary really works here. I mean, amazing, exceptional, remarkable, transformational. All of these are true. Collectively, you have moved and transformed the world from one when very few people knew about, discussed, recognized, or acknowledged human rights violations against intersex people, and even fewer were committed to preventing and remedying them. Your rigorous and exhaustive work documenting the evidence of widespread harms that intersex persons, both children and adults, face, particularly in medical settings. Your work exposing and challenging the false rationales and justifications for the abuses faced by intersex persons, including intersex genital mutilation. Your very strategic use of advocacy, communications, litigation, and alliance building. You have moved the United Nations to see, to recognize, and condemn human rights violations against intersex persons, special procedures mandates on torture, on health, treaty bodies, the Human Rights Committee, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, on the elimination of discrimination against women, on economic, social, and cultural rights, the Committee Against Torture, the UN Human Rights Office, the World Health Organizations. Just 6 months ago, you moved the governments of the United Nations Human Rights Council to adopt the first ever UN resolution condemning human rights violations against intersex persons. In Europe, you have moved the Council of Europe and the European Union. At national level, there are now national restrictions on harmful interventions against intersex children in 9 countries, and at subnational level in 2 additional countries, compared to 0 just a few decades ago. And 6 of those 9 countries are in Europe. None of this has been easy. The work has often been painful, the constant retelling and revisiting of deeply traumatic and harmful experiences, the total absence initially, and still today, the very limited levels of funding and support, the sometimes tokenistic approach to inclusion, which can lead to invisibility and disregard for the actual issues faced by intersex persons, the high levels of denial, misunderstanding, disinformation, misinformation, and lack of interest. The road is still long. Around the world, harmful practices continue against intersex children and adults in medical settings every day. 95% of states around the world, 89% in Europe, still do not have legislation in place to protect the physical integrity of intersex persons. In the small number of states that do, monitoring and implementation are nowhere near what they should be. Medical classifications at international and national level still pathologize intersex persons simply for being different. For the many intersex persons who have faced violations of their fundamental rights, justice and accountability continue to be out of reach. But you have turned the tide. You have bent the arc of history towards human rights and towards justice. And not only for intersex people, for all those who face human rights violations because their bodies are perceived by others not to match narrow, stereotypical notions, For all those who face human rights violations in medical settings and who are told that human rights standards do not apply. For all those who fight against stigma and shame and silence. And for all those who celebrate and love themselves just the way they are. In a world where it often seems that we are going backwards, you give hope to all those who fight for human rights and justice against the odds and despite the odds. Following the resolution of the Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights Office, where I work, has been tasked to write the first mandated UN report on the rights of intersex persons. You can submit your contributions to that report until 20 November. And I will drop the link to the call for inputs in the chat, and I think it'll also be shared with all participants. This report will be presented to the Human Rights Council in September 2025. There will also be a panel discussion to discuss its findings and recommendations to governments on how to further prevent and address human rights abuses faced by intersex people. And then the future of the United Nations is in your hands. I know that these and many other steps that you are planning in the coming months and years will continue to move and transform the world towards one where the human rights of intersex people are not just words on paper, but concrete and effective measures that prevent and protect children and adults from harm and from discrimination, that ensure equal opportunities to thrive, and that uphold accountability and justice. The UN Human Rights Office will continue to stand with you and support you as you advance to making this world a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for your amazing keynote speech.